Well, inflation is really taking its toll. What are some tips to reduce expenses? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today, and you know I do appreciate it. The number to call is 1-877-913-5357, 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send a question in to me through the Ask Bob portal of the website, and I'll be happy to get you an answer. Love to get your questions and your comments all at the website, prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. I was thinking about what we were talking, John Apollo and I were talking about yesterday. What a blessing it is to get to have somebody of his wisdom and knowledge and experience in the whole process of going to college, admissions, student loans, the whole thing. And he comes on every month as a Prudent Money contributor, and we talk about all kinds of things. Just a great way to get information. Because I'm in that stage right now. My oldest is, a junior in college. Then my youngest is going to be a senior, and it was interesting because with Blaine, my oldest, we were kind of going down the path of the student athlete, so it wasn't everything kind of fell into place. It wasn't that big of a deal as far as trying to make decisions, trying to get testing done, and all that kind of thing. Grayson, on the other hand, is making sure that I'm putting to use everything I've learned from John through the years. And he was, it's funny because I don't know if you caught this yesterday, but he said that August 2016 was the first time we had done a radio show together, and I'm grateful for him and his dedication to making sure that he makes time for us once a month. 1-877-913-5357. We also talked about yesterday the student loan payment deferment process that started, and I wrote about this. You can go catch this on the prudentmoney.com website. Wrote about it today, posted this morning. But we're talking about, will they extend the deferral period for student loan payments? And I got to thinking today about what a mess this has turned into to be. And of course, I don't think that they will. I don't think that they will discontinue the program. I think that they will extend through 12/31 of this year just because of the midterm elections. Everybody's looking to Biden to cancel student loan debt, and he's not been in big favor of that. He's going to be forced to do something, but I think in conjunction with whatever he's going to do, he's going to extend the student loan deferment. But I just don't think he's doing anybody any favors by doing so, because at first, before inflation really started taking a toll, we were talking about that the student loan borrowers are going to find something else to do with that money as this deferment continues to get extended. At first, I believe it was March 2020 when this started. And I think 3 or 4 times it's been up to be over with and gets extended. Well, every time they extend it, I just can see a percentage of student loan borrowers getting into more and more problems that they are not maybe even thinking about that they have. Because it's kind of one of those things, out of sight, out of mind. If you know that, obviously that you borrowed the money, you got to pay it back. But if it's not getting billed to you, then you're not thinking about it. But think about what I don't know what the average student loan payment is, but I'm assuming it's somewhere between $200 and $400. And think about what inflation has done. Inflation has, it, some reports, and it depends, of course, if you're married, if you've got kids, the number of people in your household, that kind of thing. But we're talking $400 to $500 extra a month it's costing because of inflation. And unfortunately, with no end in sight. So how in the world will student loan borrowers just pick up and start making those payments again? And let's face it, in this economy, the way things are going, we don't need more payments. So tomorrow we get, let me say this too real quick before I forget it. I saw an interesting chart of inflation. And I was noticing that the inflation in the 70s, which really took its toll and caused, I don't think personally, I think this inflation is worse than it was in the 70s. But we saw what, if you were alive back then, or if you were functioning in the economy, whatever, or you just read about it, it was not a good time. And I think today's inflation is much worse. I think the inflation rate, as you know, if you've been listening to my program, is somewhere between 20 and 25%. And if you look at the chart of inflation in the 70s, moderate inflation, where the price level where it started to climb was much higher than where it started to climb today, because we had deflation and we had low, zero interest rates. So if you compare the two moves that inflation made is currently making, and the inflation, the move made in the 70s, it's almost thus far an identical percentage move. So inflation got up to an 18 or 19 CPI, Consumer Price Index, and we're sitting at 9.6. But it started off a lot higher than what we started at this time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with inflation. Tomorrow, the unemployment report comes out, and I may be jumping the gun a little bit, but I think we're going to see a big surprise of a underperformance of the unemployment report. I don't think we're going to see a negative situation, but I think we're going to miss I don't know what the number is they're expecting to be unemployed, but I just got this feeling we're really going to miss that number, and unemployment's going to start to show a lot worse, because we're starting to see those unemployment claims numbers, which I've told you, we talked a lot about this during the pandemic. The unemployment claims numbers, that's the number of people who have been laid off or filing for unemployment benefits on a week-to-week basis, are about the only real number that we have as far as unemployment numbers go. And those are starting to creep up. We had 260,000 people file for unemployment benefits this last week, announced this morning. You're also starting to see more and more announcements of layoffs. So just kind of like the mysterious drop of the first quarter, which people pick on CNBC, but they're the biggest financial media outlet, are calling that, we're not going to count that. Something, I don't know what all created it, but there's something that's building in the economy that makes me think that we are headed for a full-blown recession. Don't like to be forecasting that, but I just see it in the numbers. And so it begs the question, where are we going from here? And at what point are we at the breaking point with the inflation rate? Of course, the inflation rate would be much worse of a situation with rising unemployment. And of course, you call that stagflation when you have high inflationary numbers and low in recession at the same time. You get what's called stagflation. 1-877-913-5357. That is the number to call, and I do have a line open. I like to bring this up from time to time, and that is why talk about the negative. And what I like to do is talk about the other side of the story that you're not hearing. And I think that's so very important that you can take both sides and make prudent decisions when it comes to what God has blessed you with to manage as a steward of what He's given you. And you just get so much agenda-filled stories of, oh, it's no big deal. And it may not be a big deal. It may be, everything may be fine, everything may be great. At the same time, I think you got to be prepared. You can't just go into any situation with your eyes closed and just hope for the best. We always want to hope for the best. I also want to be thinking, okay, what if this thing does go south? What am I going to do? How am I going to be prepared? What things should I be doing? Basically, to be the best steward I can be of what God's blessed me with. And that is always the objective. 1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. 1-877-913-5357. I feel compelled to make a public service announcement because I am a huge football fan. And I did not realize until I got in the car this morning that, and I just say this for all of you who are huge football fans, because I would hate for you to miss this if you're that desperate to watch football, which I am. The Hall of Fame football game is on tonight. I think it's the Las Vegas Raiders, and I don't know who they're playing. I can't remember. That just sticks out of my mind. So make sure you catch that if you didn't know about it, because I couldn't believe I didn't know about it. And I stay pretty glued to what's going on in the world of football. The second thing I'm excited about is doing another webinar. And I only do webinars when I feel led to speak about something. And we did one back in June, just about kind of what was going on with the market, about how to invest during a bear market. And once that got done, I was planning on doing one in July. And once again, I just didn't feel led to do anything. Last night, this is such a basic idea that I don't know why I didn't come up with, but really God led me to this idea to do a webinar on how to create a retirement plan. And it's amazing to me when I look at the statistics and the percentage, the enormous percentage of people who have no idea when, how, whether they will, whether they won't retire. And I've been doing this for so long, I look at it as this is so easy to create. But I don't look at it because I've been doing it so long. I look at it because it is easy to create. Then you got all these people telling you, oh, you need millions of dollars to retire. That is so far from the truth. Maybe you're going to have an expensive lifestyle you need millions of dollars. That's up to you. But for the most people are not going to need $1 million. So we're working on this right now. We're probably going to be doing it in a couple of weeks. And we're going to be talking about this leading up to it. But if there is one webinar, I know you're getting lots of opportunities to watch webinars, but there's one that you don't want to miss this year. It's this one, because this is information that you really need to know. I don't know about you, but I'm hearing a lot of stories of people. We were talking about inflation a while ago. Working 2 jobs, selling items. Probably the most disturbing story I saw on a neighborhood chat board, I guess that's what you call it. A lady was getting rid of her pets because she couldn't afford to keep them anymore. And I got to thinking about what are some things that you can do right now to reduce your expenses the best that you can. And I put a list together, and I thought we would talk a little bit about this today on the second half of the program. It's all about that spending plan, putting it together, working with it, making sure that it's just right, making sure you're not overspending, making sure it represents the stewardship that you want to represent as being a steward of what God's given you. But the bottom line is knowing where you're spending your money. Now here's a few things that just kind of came to mind. About 5 or 6 years ago, this was kind of a big deal 5 or 6 years ago. It's not so much a big deal today, at least I don't really hear that much about it. And I haven't been approached to do a program about it in years. But couponing used to be a pretty big deal. Probably not as big of a deal today, but you can still, it's always good to know what's on sale before you go when you're planning your grocery list for the next week, your meals for the next week, which if you're not doing that, you're kind of just going to the grocery store here and there and planning on the go. I would really challenge you to consider how much money you may be wasting by doing that. The problem with coupons today is, and I'll give CVS as just I'll pick on them because they're a great example of this. They give these 40% off of one items and 30%. Well, if you ever check the price of some of the items you buy in there, they're very overpriced, so it's pretty easy for them to give. You're probably getting about a normal coupon of about 5 to 10%. So coupons, kind of a good idea, but you're not seeing a whole lot of that. But every little bit helps, right? If you're paying attention to your grocery store, make sure that you know what kind of prices you're paying in that grocery store as compared to other grocery stores. Good example is, and because food is a big part of the overall spending plan. A good example of this is two totally different grocery stores, one across the street from my house, one about 5 miles away from me, are owned by the same company. The one that's 5 miles away from me is a nicer, cleaner grocery store, a little bit more of an upscale grocery store. They've remodeled it, done that kind of thing, than the one that's right across the street from me. Same owner, there's a huge difference in prices, just an enormous difference in prices. What you pay on the same items, because I kind of pay attention to things like that. You could also look for things like interest rate reductions, and the gap is kind of closing on things like automobiles. And people don't think about refinancing their cars, but this is a way to save $150 maybe a month. If you're paying 6 or 7%, you can still probably get 4.5 to 5% maybe, but that couple of percent down can make a difference. Tony Joe talks about ways to. He's on the program every Friday. He'll be here tomorrow. Talks about the ways to save on gas. He says the major number one thing that you can do is manage your driving habits. And the way we drive definitely affects gas mileage. Those are just a few things. I think that you've got to focus on the three types of spending, and you need to audit them. The first type of spending is non-discretionary spending. There's no choice there. You've built up that non-discretionary part of your spending plan by buying cars, your home, maybe your rent, how much gas that you use, a number of things. In other words, a non-discretionary, it's not at your discretionary whether you want to pay it unless you want to lose it. These are things that if you don't pay the bill, you lose. Very little movement except for maybe lowering interest rates on some of the items and how you shop, grocery shop, that you can lower those non-discretionary spending items. What's interesting, what I'm finding, I keep coming back to grocery shopping because that's one of the things that is a big part of the spending budget. As hard as I try personally to keep that price down, and I really do work at it, I still seem to spend about the same thing, even though, which is kind of disturbing. The next thing is, of course, your discretionary spending. This is by choice. This is where you can cut back. And this is what you want to focus on. Now, the problem is that our discretionary portion of our spending plan is probably a lot smaller than it used to be, because the non-discretionary part of our spending plan has grown. Especially that's where obviously where most of the inflation is in the non-discretionary items, because you can choose on a discretionary basis where you spend your money. But things like healthcare and health costs and you name it, when it comes to healthcare, expensive. My household has been hit with a lot of healthcare issues this year, and the expenses that go along with it is just amazing to me. That and the fact that health insurance on a monthly basis is so expensive. But then you've got what I call your unknown discretionary spending. Things you're spending money on you forget about. This is where the audit comes in. This is where you really look over with a magnifying glass where your money's going. And what you might find, I bet you will find, could be tens of hundreds of dollars that you're overspending in your budget, your spending plan. So unfortunately, I'm running out of time. We will pick this conversation back up on Monday, but be thinking about question-wise what you think or some of the things you can do, and be sure to call in next Monday and share them with us. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.